Number 1.
A mummified 2,600-year-old princess that became the subject of a frenzied tussle for ownership between Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan in 2000 is believed to be the body of the murdered 21-year-old woman, according to archaeologists. Asma Ibrahim, the curator of the National Museum in Karachi, in an 11-page report said, after detailed studies, it is quite evident that this object is modern and a fake. A cut on the body over the region of the stomach looked like a wound. Dislocation or damage of the lower vertebrate could be the cause of death. The jaw of the woman is also believed to be broken. The mummy, encased in a gilded wooden coffin set in a stone sarcophagus, was found during a police raid on the home of Balochistan chieftain in Karan, a town in the Pakistan desert bordering Iran, after a tip of that antiquities were stored in his house. For several weeks, the mummy has been stored in the basement, while the buyer on the black market was located. Sada Wali Reki, the chieftain who had been trying to sell the mummy for £35 million, claimed that it was uncovered near Quetta after an earthquake in Balochistan. He and his family have now been arrested, and the police are considering launching a murder investigation. Police moved the mummy to the National Museum in Karachi, where curators were convinced that they had come across one of the most exciting archaeological finds ever made in Pakistan. On the mummy's head was exquisite gold crown embossed with 7 cypress trees, an emblem of the ancient Persian capital of Hamadan. Gold ornaments in the coffin also suggested that the mummified body was of the royal blood. The find provoked a tug of war between Iran, Afghanistan ruling Taliban, and Pakistan, all of whom laid claim to it. Experts from all over the world congregated by the princess' bedside to argue their case for ownership. One of those not convinced, despite the excitement over the mummy, was Prof. Ahmad Dani, the director of the Institute of Asian Civilizations in Islamabad. He said, "It was quite clear from the beginning that she was fake. The inscription on her chest read, 'I am the king of this land,' in ancient hieroglyphics. Yeah, she was a woman." Prof. Dani said that the wooden coffin was not as old as her body, and while the gold crown on her head looked genuine, her masks were relatively modern, perhaps 100 years old. Most revealing was the mat on which the body was resting. He said, "I could guess that the mat was 5 years old." He reported his findings to Miss Ibrahim. "She is a former student of mine. I reminded her that no mummy has ever been found in Afghanistan, Pakistan, or Iran. It's not part of our tradition. Only the Egyptians preserved their dead in bandages." He added that the words on the breastplate were copied from the statue of King Darius in Persepolis in central Iran that dated back to 486 before Christ. He reported his findings to Miss Ibrahim. "She is a former student of mine. I reminded her that no mummy has ever been found in Afghanistan, Pakistan, or Iran. It is not part of our tradition. Only the Egyptians preserved their dead in bandages." He added that the words on the breastplate were copied from a statue of King Darius at Persepolis in central Iran that dated back to 486 before Christ. After visiting Karachi, Prof. Dani flew back to Islamabad. "I believed that the mummy was of no historical importance. If it was real, it could only be Egyptian. If it was fake, then it wasn't terribly well put together." His words disappointed the police chief, who raided the chieftain's house and took the mummy to Karachi. Prof. Dani said, "This man flew me to Karachi, hoping I could say the mummy was of archaeological importance. He wanted to be paid for his find." Meanwhile, the mystery 21-year-old mummy has been shifted from the museum to morgue. In the process, She has had to suffer the humiliation of being demoted from princess to object, in the words of the museum officials.
Number 2.
On the 1st of April 2014, Chris Kremers and Lee Sanfrun left their host family's home to take their family's dog on a walk through the Panamanian jungle. It could be the last time anyone would see them. On the 1st of April 2014, Chris Kremers and Lee Sanfrun left their host family's home to take their family's dog on a walk through the scenic forest around the Baru volcano in Phuket, Panama. Kremers and Frun were students from Amersfoort in Netherlands. They had spent 6 months planning their trip to Panama, which was supposed to serve as part vacation, part service trip. They planned on spending some time hiking and touring, while also volunteering with local children, teaching arts and crafts, and learning Spanish. The two women had been hiking around Panamanian jungle for the past 2 weeks as a part of their backpacking mission trip, and intended to stay for the next 4 weeks in their host family for volunteer at local school. However, after they waved goodbye to their family at 11 a.m. on the 1st of April, they were never seen again. The women had written a Facebook post in which they wrote about their intentions to tour the local village. They also wrote that they had had brunch with two fellow Dutchmen before embarking on the hike. On the night of the 1st of April, the host family noticed something was wrong. Their dog had returned, safe and sound, but alone. The girls were nowhere to be found. The host family searched the area around their home but decided to wait until morning to alert the authorities. On the 2nd of April, Kremers and Frun missed an appointment with local tour guide who was supposed to take them on a private walking tour of Phuket, which prompted the host family to alert the authorities. The next morning, an aerial search of the forest was conducted, as well as a foot search of the village and lightly wooded areas by locals. By the 6th of April, the two women were still missing. Fearing the worst, the Kremers and Frun families flew to Panama, bringing them detectives from the Netherlands. Along with local police and dog units, they searched the forest for 10 days. Days turned into weeks, and after 10 weeks, there has still not been any sign of Kremers and Frun. Then, as police were slowing their search efforts, a local woman turned in a blue backpack, claiming to have found it in the rice paddy along the banks of the river. Inside the backpack were 2 pairs of sunglasses, $83 in cash, Frun's passport, a water bottle, and 2 bras. Also inside, most importantly, was Frun's camera and both of the woman's cell phones. Police immediately investigated the camera and phones and came up with disturbing evidence. The phones had remained in service for almost 10 days after the women disappeared. Over just 4 days, 77 separate attempts had been made to call the police, both via 112, the emergency number in the Netherlands, and 911, the emergency number in Panama. Using the call logs, police were able to come up with an outline of the time the girls spending missing in the forest. The first 2 emergency calls had been just hours after Kremers and Frun had begun their hike to The first 2 emergency calls had been just hours after Kremers and Frun had begun their hike to the 112 emergency number. Due to the dense jungle, neither of the attempts went through. In fact, out of all 77 calls, only 1 managed to make contact but broke up after just 2 seconds. Police also discovered that on the 6th of April, several unsuccessful attempts were made to unlock Kremers' phone with an incorrect PIN number. It never received the correct number again. By the 11th of April, both phones were dead. Though the call log was disturbing, it was nothing compared to the camera. The first photos on the camera were taken the morning of the 1st of April, when the women had left for their hike. The photos show them on a trail near the Continental Divide, though nothing about them led police to become suspicious. However, the second set of photos were worrisome. Taken in the dead of night, between the hours of 1 and 4 a.m. on the 8th of April. The photos showed the girl's belongings spread out on rocks, plastic bags, and candy wrappers. Oddly big mounds of dirt, a mirror, and most worrisome, the bag of crammers had with blood leaking from her temple. After investigating the area where backpack had been found, police uncovered Kramer's clothing, neatly folded along the edge of the river. 2 months later, in the same area, a pelvic bowl and a foot, still inside a boot, were found. Soon after that, bones of both women were discovered. Lisenfru's bones looked as if they had decomposed naturally, as there were still bits of flesh attached to them. Kramer's bones were stark white and looked as if they had been bleached. Police questioned the locals, tour guides, and other hikers who had been in the area at the time, but nothing besides the photos and call logs provided them with any evidence as to what had happened. There wasn't even enough evidence to determine the cause of the death. To this day, the disappearance and deaths of Chris Kramer and Lisenfru remain a harrowing mystery.
Number 3.
The beautiful and historic St. Luke's Episcopal Church is a landmark in Cleveland, Tennessee, that has been the site of many happy events, but its origins lie with one of the city's most tragic families. The church was a gift to the city from John Henderson and Mira Edalia Thompson Crackmice in 1872 in memory of their daughter Nina. Nina was born on the 5th of August, 1864. Several historic accounts say she enjoyed riding by horse and buggy. On the 18th of October, 1871, when Nina was 7 years old, she went on a buggy ride with her maternal grandfather, Dr. Gideon Blackburn Thompson. It was St. Luke's Day. Some legends said Dr. Thompson had the race that day, while others claimed Nina was allowed to drive the buggy and was traveling too fast. Inexplicably, the buggy crossed the railroad tracks in town just as the train approached. Dr. Thompson was thrown clear the wreckage and survived, but little Nina was instantly killed. Nina's tragic death shocked the town's residents, but it is said no one grieved as deeply as her father, who adored his little girl. The first request recorded in his will stated, "I wish to very plainly be buried in the lower hand catacomb in the vault or mausoleum where sleeps the ashes of our darling little Nina." The Crackmice were a prominent Cleveland family who attended the Episcopal Church. Before Nina's death, members of the congregation met under the name St. Aban's Church, and not having the building of their own, met in Presbyterian Church building. John Crackmice decided to build an Episcopal church in Nina's memory. No expense was spared. In the churchyard, the Crackmices constructed a mausoleum of Carrara marble that cost nearly as much as the cost of building the church. It could house Nina's remains and be available for future Crackmice family burials. A legal document record in the 1900 and 1901 edition of the Southwestern Reporter, which recorded decisions of Tennessee Supreme Court, stated, the 18th of October 1871, Nina Crackmice, then about 7 years of age, the only child and daughter then living of respondent and the testator, were accidentally killed, and in her memory of testator and respondent in 1872 erected a church, to wit, St. Luke's Memorial Episcopal Church in said town of Cleveland. and 2 or 3 years later constructed a marble mausoleum for the purpose of containing the remains of their child and of themselves after their death, said to structure costing between $40,000 and $50,000. Upon its completion, the church was named St. Luke's Memorial Episcopal Church in Nina's honor. It was consecrated on St. Luke's Day in 1872. Historians say the building is one of the few Oxford Movement Gothic churches in the world to maintain its integrity. The only additions over the decades have been electricity, air conditioning, and heating. The mausoleum is also an architectural bride in its Gothic spires and statues of angels holding lamps and crosses. Above the mantle doors is etched J. H. Crackmice. On the doors themselves are words, Nina, October 1871. Nina's remains lie in a marble sarcophagus in the center of the mausoleum. A fringed blanket topped with a crown and the cross are carved atop it. Along its side, among a carved ivy drape is etched, born the 5th of August, 1864. Nina, daughter of M. Adelia and John H. E. Crackmice, fell asleep at the 18th of October, 1871. John Crackmice would join his beloved Nina in heaven in 1899 after succumbing to blood poisoning from an injury he sustained in a fall on an icy city street. Adelia lived nearly 3 decades more, but her death, too, would be shocking. At the age of 80, she was struck by a car while crossing a Cleveland street. Although she had married again to a man named Charles Cross, she, too, is entombed in the Crackmice Mausoleum. The Crackmice Mausoleum is a tourist attraction in the Cleveland today, not only for its architectural beauty, but for eerie mystery surrounding it. At some point following Nina's entombment, residents appear on the white marble exterior of the mausoleum. Efforts to remove the stains failed. According to legend, the stained marble blocks were replaced several times, but the red stains always returned. As is the case with many sites linked to the tragic deaths, reports of supernatural sightings at the crypt are common. Some say they have seen the little girl in the 18th attire playing in the area. Today, the blood red stains are visible on the mausoleum, another testament to impact made on the local history by a little girl taken too early from this world.
Number 4.
On the 21st of February 1997, a gentleman called into a radio show, Coast to Coast AM, hosted by Art Bell with sensational and unbelievable tale. His name was Mel Waters. He told Bell and his listeners about a strange and mysterious bottomless pit on his rural Washington state property and the eerie qualities surrounding the pit, which became known as Mel's Hole. Many people became fascinated with the bottomless pit. The problem was, Mel Waters refused to give its exact location and no one could find it. Was Mel House a hoax? Or was it, as Waters himself claims, purposely covered up by the United States government? Let us peer into Mel's Hole. When Mel Waters called into Art Bell's his syndicated radio show in 1997 to tell the world about Mel's Hole, he was contacting the host of a well-known show that featured tales of unexplained. He knew his sensation story would be delivered to a right audience. The late-night radio show, which comprised long-format interviews with call-ins, has a weekly audience for close to 2.75 million people, and the show is carried on more than 600 radio stations in the United States, Canada, and Australia. Originally created and hosted by Bell, who passed away on the 13th April 2018, Coast to Coast AM used with paranormal topics. According to Mel Waters, the pit is a natural hole on his property in Kittitas County, Washington, about 9 miles from the town of Ellensburg. He used the pit as his own personal dump, toasting trash and discarded items in the hole. He noticed, however, that he never heard any of the discarded items hit the bottom. Curious about the depth of the hole, Mel did an experiment. He used a fishing hole with a weighted line and dropped it into the pit to measure its depth. To his astonishment, the fishing line went down to more than 80,000 feet and still hadn't hit the bottom. The bottomless pit as deep as 80,000 feet would be odd enough, but Mel had more to tell about the mysterious place. He claimed that the hole did not produce an echo when he yelled into it. He also stated that his neighbor threw a carcass of his dead dog into the pit, but a few days later, he encountered his dog, alive and well, in a nearby goose. He knew for certain it was his dog because it was wearing a same color. Mel's own dogs, however, were terrified of the pit and refused to go anywhere near it. Mel also stated that he once brought his radio to the site, but he couldn't tune into the favorite station. Instead, the radio played unknown voices and old music. In addition to the 1997 call to Art Bell's Coast to Go AM, Mel Waters appeared on a show in 2000 and in 2002, each time telling more sensational claims about Mel's hole. According to Waters, he once saw a black beam shoot out from the hole. He also stated that if he held a metal object near the pit 9-foot wide opening, they could magically change into other metals. These claims were enough to arouse curiosity and skepticism. Adding fuel to the controversy was Mel Waters' claim that the government was covering up the wonders of Mel's hole. Waters stated that one day he was walking toward Mel's hole when a man wearing a suit approached him. Behind the man, Waters could see several other people wearing official-looking biohazard suits. The man told Waters that the area had been closed off due to a plane crash and that Waters was no longer allowed near the pit. Next, Waters said the government leased the land from him and paid him a generous amount of money to leave the property. Waters used the money to move to Australia. Certainly, there are very deep holes found at various locations around the globe, but none as deep as Mel's hole was said to be, 80,000 feet. The deepest known cavern is only 7,188 feet deep, and the deepest mine shaft is 12,672 feet. In 1989, the Russians drilled a borehole to the depth of 4,230 feet, but that is still only half the depth that Mel Waters claimed his pit was. Jack Powell, a geologist with the State Department of Natural Resources, explained that a hole as deep as 80,000 feet was a geological impossibility. Going so deep into the Earth's core would cause the hole to collapse from the tremendous pressure and heat. Mel Waters was careful not to give out an exact location of Mel's hole, but a handful people say that they have seen it themselves. One of them was Gerard Osborne, who also goes by the name Red Elk. His half-Native American, half-white medicine man told journalists in 2012 that he had been to Mel's Hole several times, beginning in 1969. This half-Native American, half-white medicine man told journalists in 2012 that he had been to Mel's Hole several times, beginning in 1961. He backed up Waters' claims about the strange bottomless pit. Red Elk went so far as to state that the United States government had a secret base at Mel's Pit, where the government scientists were searching island activity. Red Elk went so far as to state the United States government had a secret base at Mel's Pit. Red Elk went so far as to state that the United States government had a secret base at Mel's Pit, where the government scientists were researching island activities. But when investigators asked Red Elk to take them to Mel's Hole, he inexplicably could not find his way back to the site. While most experts believe that Mel's Hole is a fantastic urban legend with no basis in fact, there are others who believe Mel's account of mysterious bottomless pit. While most experts believe that Mel's Hole is a fantastic urban legend with no basis in fact, there are others who believe Mel's account of mysterious bottomless pit and the ensuing government cover-up. There are numerous abandoned mine shafts in the area that could have served as the inspiration for the tale. There are, of course, a number of odd and unexplained geological anomalies around the world, and supporters of Mel Waters believe he stumbled upon one of these mysterious locations in Washington.
Number 5.
The mystery of the 1983 disappearance of the 15-year-old daughter of a Vatican employee took yet another twist Saturday following excavations this week at the Vatican City Cemetery. The Vatican said it has discovered 2 sets of bones under a stone slab that will be formally opened next week. The new discovery came after Vatican investigators on Thursday opened the tombs of 2 19th-century German princes in the cemetery of the Pontifical Teutonic College in hopes of finding the remains of Emanuela Orlandi. Orlandi's family had received a tip that she might be buried there, but the tombs turned out to be empty, creating yet another mystery to explore. Where are the princess' remains? The Vatican vowed to keep investigating and noted that bones that might have been in the tombs could have been displaced during the structural work carried on both college building and a cemetery near St. Peter's Basilica in the 18th or in more recent decades. On Saturday, Vatican spokesman Alessandro Gisotti said further searches had centered on the areas adjoining the prince's tombs. He said investigators had located 2 ossuaries, containers into which bones of dead are placed, under a stone slab inside the Teutonic College itself. He said the area had immediately been sealed off and would be opened in the presence of forensic experts on the 20th of July. Gisotti added that the ossuaries were found in 2 holes carved out of a large stone that was discovered by an old pavement stone a few yards behind the prince's tombs. The area is now technically inside a building of the Teutonic College after expansions work on the building encroached onto the cemetery field. The last recorded structural work done on the building and the cemetery was in the 1960s and 1970s. Orlandi disappeared in 1983. She vanished after leaving her family's Vatican City apartment to go to a music lesson in Rome. Her father was a lay employee of the Holy See. Her case has been one of the enduring mysteries of the Vatican, kept alive by the Italian media and a quest by her brother to find answers. Over the years, her disappearance has been linked to everything, from a plot to kill St. John Paul II to the financial scandal of the Vatican Bank and the Rome's criminals underworld. The last major twist in the case came in 2012 when Italian forensic police exhumed the body of a reputed monster from the crypt of a Roman basilica in hopes of finding Orlandi's remains as well. The search turned up no link. Last year, bones were found underneath the Vatican's embassy to Italy in Rome. Italian media immediately speculated the remains could belong to Orlandi or to another girl who went missing around the same time. But forensic tests showed that the bones long predated their disappearances. Pietro Orlandi, the missing girl's brother, has long demanded the Vatican give their family full access to all the information it has about his sister's disappearance. The family's lawyer, Laura Sgro, said Saturday she had been informed of the discovery of the bones and that the family was pleased that the investigation was continuing. Our interest is to actively cooperate with Vatican prosecutors to understand better how those two tombs could have been empty, she said in a statement. If we understand together, it's better. In 2017, an Italian investigative journalist caused a sensation when he published a 5-page document said to have been stolen from a locked Vatican cabinet that suggested the Holy See had been involved in Orlandi's disappearance. The Vatican immediately branded a document a fake, though it never explained what it was doing in the Vatican cabinet. The document purportedly was written by a cardinal and listed expenses used for Orlandi's upkeep after she disappeared. Gisotti said this week that the Holy See has always shown attention and closeness to the suffering of the Orlandi family and in particularly Emanuela's mother, that its decision to excavate the Teutonic cemetery at the family's request was an evidence of that attention. In July 2019, the Vatican excavated the tombs of two 19th century German princes in the Pontifical Teutonic Catholic Cemetery after an anonymous tip was received that Emanuela's remains were buried inside them. Instead, they found completely empty tombs, meaning the remains of the princes are in question as well. During these excavations, two sets of bones are found under the stone stub, which are in the process of being inspected. Hopefully, the mystery of what happened to Emanuela Orlandi will finally solved in 2019.
Number 6.
Kathy Hope's experienced much stress as a young girl. Her parents divorced, and in her 7th grade, her best friend died of a heart condition. Kathy frequently spoke of her own fears of death and insisted to anybody that would listen that she could not live past the age of 16. Her mother recalls Kathy's high-stress conversation with her. She got very teary-eyed one night and told me, "Mom, I don't want to get any older. I want to be a little girl." And her mother replied her, "Kathy, we all have to grow up. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but we all do it." And Kathy told her, "But I'm not going to." Kathy's fears were so intense that she lived a very solitary lifestyle and refused to leave the house most days. But once her 16th birthday rolled around, she felt a sense of relief, like weight had been lifted. Her mother remembers Kathy's words of relief. "I made it, Mom. I made it. I'm 16. I did it. I'm alive." Freed from her dark premonitions, Kathy enrolled as a beauty student and was happy again. However, on the 23rd of July, 1987, just 3 months after her 16th birthday, she told her mother she was running to the corner store. Strangely enough, she insisted her mother give her a kiss before leaving, her reasoning being that she knew her mother would be asleep before she got home. Her mother assumed she was going to make a trip with friends from the apartment complex. However, none of those funds were available, so Kathy went alone. At 11:17, Kathy purchased a paperback novel from the corner store, which was verified by receipts and interviews with the clerk, who said nothing seemed unusual about the transaction or Kathy's mood. Kathy's mother had already retired to bed for the night, and Kathy was not discovered as missing until the next morning. Shockingly enough, her mother also showed signs of foreseeing her daughter's death, as she recalls in an interview that she woke up at 3 a.m. that night after experiencing a disturbing dream. "I woke up out of a sound sleep. I felt like I had been hit on the head. And all of a sudden, I got a very blissful feeling, and I thought, well, it's over now, and I fell back asleep." While the area that Kathy went missing from was always quite populated, even at that time of night, there were no witnesses to her abductions. 9 days later, a geologist studying rock formations uncovered a grisly truth. Katie's body was lying on the ground next to 2 large stones, which bore the telltale stains of dried blood. Further testing would reveal the blood type matched Katie's, and her cause of death was determined to be a blunt force trauma to the head, just like in her mother's dream. Tire tracks showed a vehicle had pulled into area, turned left, and pulled right back out. A search of Katie's room yielded letters she had written to her family, dated just 1 month before her 16th birthday, where she detailed her love for her family, comforted them, and told them not to be sad over her inevitable death. Later that month, the Las Vegas police received an anonymous tip on their recorded tip line that gave the details of Katie's abduction and murder which no civilian could have known. The recording correctly describes where Kathy was taken and what she was wearing and where her body was found. They also gave the description of the car supposedly used along with the license plate and the driver's name, Robbie. However, when the police ran the plate number, no such car exists. Despite multiple pleas to the public for the anonymous caller to come forward, they never heard from him again. Michael Lee Lockhart, a serial killer who was already in the process of being convicted for 4 other murders, was most likely suspect. He had stolen a car whose blue fibers matched trace fibers collected at the scene, and receipts found in his possession matched the time and place of Katie's last outing. Because he was already being sentenced to death for the other murders, Nevada decided not to pursue further investigation. While he never officially confessed, some sources cite a virtual confession where it seems he indicated that he was her killer, although that has never been proven in the court of law. Kathy lived to be 16 years, 3 months and 3 days old. While she did live to see her 16th birthday, her fears of not living past 16 seem to have been correct.
Number 7.
At the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh are the set of 8 miniature coffins carved in wood and decorated with tin iron. Each coffin contains a tiny wooden finger with a painted face and dressed in clothes that have been stitched and glued around them. Since their discovery in a cave by a group of young lads one June afternoon in 1836, the miniature figurines have been a source of much fascination and mystery. The boys have been out all day, hunting for rabbits on the slopes of a rocky peak known as Author's Seat, when their attention was drawn towards a small cave hidden behind a slab of slate. After pulling back the slab of stone, the boys found 17 little coffins inside, each barely 4 inches long, arranged in 3 tiers, 2 rows of each, and a solitary coffin at the top. The discovery was important enough to find a place in the 16th of July edition of the Scotsman, year 1836. The paper reported, each of the coffins contained a miniature finger of the human form cut out in wood, and faces in particularly being pretty well executed. They were dressed from the head to foot in cotton clothes, and decently laid out with mimic representation of all funeral trappings, which usually form the last habiliments of the dead. The coffins are about 3 or 4 inches in length, regularly shaped, and cut out from a single piece of wood, with the exception of lids, which are nailed down with wire sprigs or common brass beams. The lids and sides of each are profusely studded with ornaments formed of small pieces of tin, and inserted in the wood with great art and regularity. Stranger still were the size that seemed to imply that the coffins were deposited over a considerable period of time, indicated by the rotten and decayed state of the first tier of coffins and their wooden mummies. The early coffins had the wrapping cloth, in some instances, entirely mouldered away, while others show various degrees of decomposition, while the coffin placed last was as clean and fresh as if only a few days had elapsed since their entombment. The article concluded, but with some hesitation, that the coffins were misdoings of some of the weird sisters hovering about Mashad Kane or Windigo, who retained their ancient power to work the spells of death by entombing the likenesses of those they wished to destroy. In that, witchery was the most immediate assumption. Scotland and Edinburgh in particular have a dark history of witcheries. Better 4,000 to 6,000 witches were executed in Scotland between the 16th and 18th centuries, 300 of which were burned at the Edinburgh Castle, more than anywhere else in Scotland. Today, there is a memorial fountain at the castle, known as the Witch's Well, commemorating all the murdered women. Before long, other newspapers picked up the story, concluding with their own interpretation of the coffins. The Edinburgh Evening Post mused whether the coffins might be an ancient custom which prevailed in Saxony, of burying in effigy departed friends who had died in a distant land. The Caledonia Mercury concurred, adding that some sailors also instruct their wives on parting to give them Christian burial in an effigy if they happen to be lost at sea. In the 1990s, a new theory emerged linking the 17 fingers to the 17 victims of the notorious Edinburgh serial killers Buck and Hare, who in the late 1820s went on a killing spree to supply cadavers to medical practitioners. It was proposed that the tiny fingers were tributes to the victims, despite the fact that the pair's victims were mostly women, while the wooden bodies were dressed in men's clothing. In the 1990s, a new theory emerged linking the 17 fingers to 17 victims of the notorious Edinburgh serial killers Buck and Hare, who in the late 1820s went on a killing spree to supply cadavers to medical practitioners. It was proposed that the tiny fingers are tributes to the victims, despite the fact that the pair's victims were mostly women, while all the Gutian bodies were dressed in men's clothing. Dr. Alan Simpson and Professor Samuel Menefee of the University of Edinburgh and the University of Virginia, respectively, carried out a detailed study of the fingers in 1994 and have suggested that the toys were not kept for the purpose of burial, but were adapted from a set of good toy soldiers manufactured around the 1790s, but not reclothed or buried in the cave until 1830s. The conclusion was based on the findings that some of the dolls had their arms removed, apparently to allow the fingers to fit into its coffin, and the markings on their lower bodies that seemed to indicate the fingers were originally made to stand upright. The eyes were also painted open, making it unlikely they were originally designed as corpses. Of the 17 original coffins, only 8 survived and are at the Edinburgh National Museum of Scotland. The rest, at the Scotsman of 16th of July 1836 reported, were either badly damaged or lost altogether, as the decrepit-looking cache provided convenient fodder for the boys to pelt one another with.
Number 8.
The body of a man without hands, thought to have been buried hundreds of years old, has been found by archaeologists on a rocky islet off the coast of Guernsey, one of the British Channel Islands, just a few feet from where the mysterious medieval skeleton of a dolphin was found last year. Theodore Jersey, a Guernsey government archaeologist, said that a skeleton of the handless man appeared to have been buried much later than the baffling burial of that dolphin skeleton on the same islet, and therefore the two burials probably aren't related. But he said that the latest find added much to the mystery of the rocky islet of Chapelle d'Ombre. The islet lies about 900 feet 300 meters from the west coast of Guernsey, overlooking the sea and the stones of Neolithic burial ground on the mainland of the island. Though Chapelle d'Ombre is only about 50 feet 10 meters across today, so small that the sea at high tide cuts it into two pieces, archaeologists say it was once larger. During the medieval period, an islet was home to a colony of a few reclusive Christian monks, they said. The archaeological team first thought the skeleton found this year might have been that of a monk who had suffered from leprosy, which might account for the missing wrists and hands, the Jersey told Life Science. But some details of the remains of the man's clothes, especially the shirt buttons, made the researchers think that the body was buried in the 16th or 17th century, well after Chapelle d'Ombre was occupied by monks. Our working hypothesis at the moment is that this is a drowning or a body washed up, the Jersey said. It was given a quick but relatively respectful Christian burial at the spot where it got washed up on that island. Dolphin burial. Last year, the Jersey reported that his team had found a dolphin skeleton that appeared to have been buried on the island sometime during the Middle Ages, when monks had lived there. The carefully buried skeleton perplexed the archaeologists because it might have been easily been just dumped in the sea a few yards away without the trouble of a burial. The dolphin carcass, the Jersey said, might have been buried with salt to preserve it for eating, and then forgotten, or perhaps it was regarded as a holy animal, although his research has not revealed why a dolphin would be regarded as a holy at that time and place. Subsequent studies of the dolphin skeleton tended to confirm that it was buried on the islet in the early 1400s, but no further light had been shed on the mysterious burial, he told Life Science. The human burial on the island had come to light in the last few months as a small cliff had weathered away, about 30 feet 10 meters from the site where the dolphin skeleton had been found, he said. Eventually, the weathering revealed the upper part of the foot and toe bones. Archaeologists then excavated the site and found the remains of a man about 5 feet tall, but without any hands or wrist bones. The Guernsey now thinks that the human body washed up on the islet and was buried there sometime in the 15th or 16th.